Now, I was able to sit down with Governor Fallin to hear her thoughts on the state of our state's economy. Madam Governor, you just returned from Washington, D.C., where you sat on the Executive Committee of the National Governors Association. And meeting with those national lawmakers, your former colleagues, what did you tell them about our needs here in Oklahoma?
Well, one of the things we've been debating as a nation is the debt and the deficit. We're concerned about what's going on around the world with what's happening in Greece and Italy and France and many other countries in Europe, and about their economies, our debt to China, for an example, and how that affects America, and then just the spending going on in Washington, D.C. And of course, now with the super committee being mandated that they have to make certain cuts by a certain date, or the cuts automatically go into effect by federal law, there's some challenges ahead for the states across the nation. So as I was meeting with the National Governors Association yesterday, I said, you know, as governors, we have to have a plan, because the super committee has to have their plan in place and voted on by November 23rd. And if the governors aren't a part of the discussion in Washington, then we don't know what's going to happen to our states. We know there are going to be spending cuts. We know we need to do that to help secure our nation's future because of the deficit of our nation and what's going on with national economies. But governors have to be a part of that discussion to talk about how can we encourage job growth, how can we work on making government more efficient, more effective? Where are ways that, say, the government holds us back from making the types of reforms that we need to make on the state level? And frankly, the states can be the leaders of innovation, whether it's in the private sector or whether it's in government reform, to give the federal government and Washington ideas, because Washington's so polarized, so frozen right now, they can't get anything done in Washington. So we met with some U.S. senators yesterday who were former governors to talk to them about ideas that the governors have.
I want to talk to you a little bit about that polarization. We are really entering into this new presidential election cycle, and the negativity always rises. Are you concerned, especially when it comes to consumer confidence, when you hear all this bad stuff going on all the time, are you concerned it could affect consumer and business confidence?
I'm not concerned. I know it's affecting it. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind it's affecting consumer confidence to hear all the polarization in Washington, D.C., the lack of finding solutions to problems. You know, I just spoke this week at the Small Business Conference, the Governor's Small Business Conference here in Oklahoma. And, you know, small businesses and small business owners invest their own money. It's not shareholders' money. It's not some blind person out there, blind from the standpoint of investing into a company in stocks, but it's the actual small business owners' money that creates jobs, that invest in expanding their businesses or hiring Oklahomans. And so it's a whole different ballgame when you're talking about an individual taking money out of their pocket, trying to create jobs in Oklahoma. And when you have all this uncertainty in the marketplace, you don't know what the rules of the game are going to be, and Congress going back and forth about tax cuts or increasing taxes or national health care or non-national health care, or even some of the issues about the National Labor Relations Board and unionization and those kind of things. When businesses don't know what the playing field is, then they sit back and they don't spend money, they don't create jobs, they don't expand their businesses, and frankly, even consumers don't buy. That's what I heard some of the small business owners in Oklahoma say, is that sales are down right now because people like you and I, taxpayers, are worried about what's going on in Washington, what's going on with the economy, so they're not spending money, and that doesn't help bring us out of this recession.
When you're out talking to, whether it be a small business or a large business, talking about the business climate here in Oklahoma, and maybe you're talking to someone internationally, what do you tell them about Oklahoma's business climate?
Oh, I love to talk about Oklahoma's business climate. Now that the legislative session is over with, I've been doing some targeted meetings, and what the Secretary of Commerce and I talk about is our thank you tour, to thank companies that have made investments in Oklahoma. You know, American Airlines, I've been to their corporate headquarters in Dallas to meet with their CEO worldwide. I've been to meet with AT&T, who's their CEO, who's a former Oklahoman, to talk about their investment in Oklahoma. Thank him once again and their investments. I've been to Chicago, I've been to New York, I've been to California, lots of different places, talking to people who have made big investments in companies in our state, to say thank you, first of all, and to certainly ask for their business, but also to tell them about some great reforms that Oklahoma has passed this year alone to make Oklahoma more business friendly, to talk about our low unemployment, our low cost of living, our low cost of doing business in our state, our lawsuit reform, our workers' comp reform, major education reform. I mean, even to the point of how we've reduced $3 billion of unfunded liabilities in our pension systems is big news in the nation. And that we balanced a budget, even though we had a budget shortfall in our state's budget, we not only balanced our budget, but we cut our income tax. And there are a lot of states that can't say those things. And so when I can tell a positive story of how Oklahoma is trying to be more pro-business, focusing on education reform, workforce development, I mean, that's a great selling story for our state, and it's making a difference.
And it sounds like when you travel nationally, you're getting kudos, and it sounds like you feel good about where we're going.
Well, I do feel good about where we're going. Now, that doesn't mean we're finished with our work. We still got a lot more work to go. As I was visiting with the small business owners this week, they were telling me that we still have a lot of needs in our workforce, making sure that we have a highly skilled, educated workforce. And Oklahoma actually has been seen as one of the leaders this year in workforce development and education reform. I had the opportunity to go to New York a couple weeks ago to speak at Rockefeller Plaza at NBC's production called Education Nation, in which they featured different governors and what's happening in education and workforce development in our nation. And Oklahoma is actually leading in that area, looking at how we can develop a highly skilled, educated workforce, not only from the standpoint we need more college graduates, more high school graduates, but how can we develop more technical skills and certificates of skill sets in our workforce to help showcase Oklahoma's employees and to provide the workforce that our employers need.
All right, some exciting times in our state. Thank you, Madam Governor.
Thank you.
And I continue my conversation with Governor Fallin on our website. Just go to okhorizon.com, click on this week's Value Added.